Let me tell you exactly what is happening right now, because what you are watching unfold on the world stage is not just a military conflict. It is not just a diplomatic crisis. It is the single most consequential and terrifying sequence of events in decades. And the man sitting in the Oval Office just stood in front of the entire world on primetime television and told you with a straight face that everything is going perfectly. And I want you to understand just how deeply, profoundly, and dangerously dishonest that is, because on Wednesday night, President Donald Trump delivered his first primetime address from the White House since the United States and Israel launched strikes on Iran back on the 28th of February. And what he said in that address should have every single person watching this video genuinely alarmed, not because of the threats he made, though those were alarming enough, but because of what he failed to say, what he refused to address, what he left hanging in the air like smoke over a burning city, which was any coherent, credible, remotely believable answer to the most important question in the world right now. How does this end? Because Trump stood at that podium and vowed to hit Iran extremely hard. He threatened to bomb the country back to the Stone Ages, his words. Not mine. He repeated threats to destroy Iranian infrastructure, including electrical plants, unless a deal was struck. And yet, and this is the part that should make your blood run cold, he offered absolutely no clear exit strategy, not a single roadmap, not a single defined condition for what victory looks like, not a single honest answer to the question that every American soldier's family, every oil-dependent nation on earth, every investor watching markets collapse in real time, every ordinary human being with electricity bills and fuel costs and a basic interest in not seeing the world economy implode is desperately asking, what is the plan? Because threatening to bomb a country back to the Stone Ages is not a plan. It is a declaration of unlimited escalation with no defined endpoint. And that is not strength. That is the most dangerous thing a leader of the most powerful military on earth can do, and the markets knew it immediately, because within hours of that address, oil prices surged more than 7%. The steepest single-day rise in 3 weeks, and stock markets around the world fell. Indexes across Asia were hit particularly hard. And you have to understand why Asia matters here. Because these are countries that import vast quantities of oil and gas from the Middle East, countries whose entire economic infrastructure depends on stable energy prices, countries that are now watching the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping lanes on the entire planet, being choked off by Iran, causing oil and natural gas prices to spike in ways that are already sending shockwaves through ordinary people's lives from Manila to Tokyo to Seoul. And Trump stood at that podium and had the extraordinary audacity to frame the opening of the Strait of Hormuz as an issue for other nations, even though just hours before that very same speech, he had explicitly said he would not agree to any ceasefire deal unless the waterway was opened. So which is it? Is it America's problem or isn't it? Because you cannot claim this war is an overwhelming success and simultaneously tell the rest of the world to sort out the economic catastrophe your war has created. You cannot have it both ways. And the investors and the economists and the energy analysts who are watching that address, desperately hoping for some signal of de-escalation, some hint of an off-ramp, some indication that the adults in the room had a plan to bring this to a controlled conclusion. They were left with nothing, absolutely nothing, except a promise of more bombs and more escalation, and a man who appeared to be more interested in defending his own legacy than in confronting the devastating human and economic reality of what is unfolding. And then there is the question of Iran's military capability, because Trump said in his speech, and I want you to really hear this, he said that Iran's ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed. Those were his exact words. And within hours, Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps issued a statement directly contradicting that claim, saying that American and Israeli strikes had not decimated their missile production centers, had not destroyed their long-range drones, had not eliminated their air defenses or their electronic warfare systems. And they went further. They said, and this is a direct challenge to everything Trump claimed, that the United States and Israel know nothing about their vast and strategic capabilities. And the brutal reality is that the evidence on the ground supports Iran's version of events more than it supports Trump's, because yes, the US and Israeli militaries have destroyed many of Iran's ballistic missiles and launchers in airstrikes. That is true, and it is significant. But a large number remain undamaged. Iran continues to launch missiles and drones. Israel's military confirmed on Thursday morning that its forces had intercepted missiles launched from Iran after Trump's speech claiming their capability was dramatically curtailed. The United Arab Emirates said their forces had responded to drone and missile strikes from Iran. Saudi Arabia reported intercepting a missile and drones, so the region is still under active attack. The missiles are still flying, and the President of the United States is on television telling you the enemy's ability to fight has been dramatically curtailed. This is not spin. This is not political messaging. This is a leader telling his people something that the events of the very next morning directly contradicted, and that matters enormously because decisions get made based on assessments. Wars escalate or de-escalate based on how accurately leaders understand the situation on the ground, and if the assessment being presented to the American public, and perhaps to the decision makers themselves, is that Iran's military is nearly broken when the evidence suggests it is very much still operational, then the decisions being made on the basis of that assessment are being made on false ground. And false ground in a war of this magnitude is not a political problem. It is a catastrophic danger, and then there is the nuclear question, because Trump argued in his address that Iran was on the cusp of building a nuclear weapon. And this is where it gets genuinely complicated, because American intelligence agencies have concluded that, yes, Iran could have produced bomb-grade nuclear fuel within days or weeks. That part is true, and it is alarming, but it would take months or more than a year to fashion that fuel into an actual weapon. Months to a year. And that distinction matters enormously because the gap between having enriched uranium and having a deployable nuclear weapon is not a technicality. It is a window for diplomacy, a window for inspection, a window for deals and agreements and the kind of painstaking negotiation that prevents the word nuclear from becoming the word catastrophe. And Trump's framing collapsed that distinction in ways that were either deliberately misleading or genuinely uninformed. And I am not sure which of those options is more frightening. And while all of this is happening at the geopolitical level, while markets are crashing and missiles are flying and world leaders are scrambling, let us take a moment, because this matters more than any stock index, to talk about the human beings who are dying. Because the human rights activist news agency has reported that at least 1,606 civilians have been killed in Iran since this war began. 1,606 human beings, including 244 children. 244 children, and Lebanon's health ministry has reported that more than 1,318 Lebanese have been killed since the latest fighting between Israel and Hezbollah began. And in attacks blamed on Iran, at least 50 people have been killed in Gulf nations, and in Israel at least 17 have been killed. And the American military death toll stands at 13 service members, with hundreds more wounded, 13 American soldiers who went to serve their country and did not come home. And the families of those 13 people watched their president stand on primetime television and call this war an overwhelming success. And I want you to think about what that feels like. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because success is not a word that belongs anywhere near those numbers, and yet here we are. And the economic ripple effects of all of this are already being felt far beyond the battlefield, because Iraq, an American ally, the same Iraq that just weeks ago filed a formal complaint at the United Nations over a US strike on one of its military clinics, has now begun exporting oil by land through Syria following disruptions to shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. This is what a regional war does. It forces sovereign nations to reroute their entire energy infrastructure through war-torn corridors, because the normal pathways have become too dangerous. And the Philippines declared a national energy emergency last month and was only able to get Iran to grant safe passage through the strait for ships under its flag. A small mercy in the middle of an economic catastrophe that is squeezing ordinary families across the developing world hardest of all. And Britain's Foreign Secretary was hosting a virtual emergency meeting with dozens of nations, notably not including the United States, about Iran's de facto blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Dozens of nations sitting around a virtual table trying to figure out how to manage the fallout of a war that America started. And America is now telling everyone else to figure out. And I say all of this not because I am rooting for any side in this conflict. I say it because the truth does not take sides. The truth just is. And the truth right now is this. A war is being fought with no defined exit strategy. A president is claiming overwhelming success while missiles continue to fly and civilians continue to die, and oil prices continue to surge and markets continue to fall. Intelligence assessments are being presented selectively to justify escalation rather than honestly to navigate toward resolution. And the rest of the world, allies, partners, neighbors, is being left to clean up the economic consequences of decisions made in Washington without their input and without their consent. And that is not leadership. That is not strength. That is a superpower acting with the recklessness of a nation that has forgotten what it means to bear responsibility for the consequences of its own power. And the world is watching and the world is paying, and the question that history will ask, the question that should be keeping every single decision maker in Washington awake tonight, is not whether America is winning this war, but whether anyone has seriously thought through what winning actually means, what it looks like, what comes after, because dropping bombs is the easy part. It is the morning after that always defines whether a war was worth it. And right now, nobody in the White House appears to have a credible answer to that question. And that, more than any missile, more than any market crash, more than any primetime address, is what should terrify you most. This has been the royal truth. If this opened your eyes, share it. Because the truth doesn't spread itself, and right now the world needs more of it than ever.